Hi, I'm IKEA, and for today's video, we're going to have a build showcase going into the Lengmo Pestilence setup, and in the way that I like setting it up, which is to go for a balance between its DPS output and also its tick output, as of course the Pestilence does apply its debuff. And yeah, as with all build showcases, we'll go heavily into the build collection as well. And in this case, though, we're going to discuss basically one build on it, which is 1.03. All of this will be linked down below the build collection and that build itself, of course. And everything will be time-stamped as well, as in the first chapter, we'll kind of go over the build, first starting with its layout, then its build picture, going also into some numbers that I've kind of prepared as we've prepared a spreadsheet, kind of discussing why we do it the way that we do it. And then in a second chapter, we'll take it into some gameplay, and I will try to give my thoughts as I play to try to give you the tools if you were to want to put this build together to be already somewhat prepared to how to use it, and also share kind of my knowledge as I've played around with this one quite a bit recently, and I've quite enjoyed it. So yeah, let's go get started with the build layout, and let's get started with this showcase. And starting off with showing the build, as I've kind of have it on the build picture there as well, as we'll see in a second. And that is 3 pieces of Lengmo here with the chest, with the glass cannon on the chest as well, which means this is a super unicorn. We'll come back to that in a second. Then a coyote, contractors, and fox. Contractors and 4-piece Lengmo, of course, are kind of, or 3-piece Lengmo, those 4 pieces together are kind of a no-brainer. All of them apply to LMGs, of course, and especially as well, one of the ways to kind of look at this 3-piece Lengmo, because it might seem kind of expensive to kind of go into this route, of course, with investing basically into two things that we're, 2 brand bonuses that we're really not using. But the way to kind of see it is that this LMG, this 30% LMG, just see it as a 10% LMG, 10% LMG, 10% LMG. Kind of like the same as Petrov. It's kind of the same amounts basically spread over those, and then the other stuff is just not even a bonus, but it's not a hindrance either. And that's kind of the way to look towards the Lengmo setup as we kind of have it. That is why Lengmo as well has become kind of the go-to for the Pestilence, as that does scale off of weapon damage, especially. The contractors here, then, of course, with that damage to armor is very nice as well. The damage to armor will apply to the pesty ticks as well. And of course, contractors is just, especially if we're using an LMG, which we are here, one of the best picks we can put in there. The Fox's Prayer, as it comes into here, is of course for that damage to targets out of cover. We're not really making use of that rifle. We could actually have a rifle secondary, which is actually what I have on the build picture. But here, I've gone with a Sleipnir, for instance, as a secondary, as that can also situationally be pretty useful. And then we're pairing it here as well with the coyote. The coyote is a point of contention I've kind of found with a lot of people. And that's also one of the things as to how this build is kind of set up. This isn't the highest tick. It's not even close to the highest tick. You can definitely go for the highest tick. And I've said tick so much that it has lost all meaning in my brain. But overall, that is, to me, not the better way to set this up. The build itself can do a lot of damage. The tick can do a lot of damage. Speccing into the tick to get it just a little bit higher, but losing a lot on the build, is to me the wrong way to go. Overall, what I want is a balance between what the build itself can hit for, and then have a really good tick alongside of it. Because there's a point which you'll reach where the tick is actually strong enough to kill, and then it will basically just start killing stuff and bouncing around, keeping up our backpack talent, for instance, in this case with Perfect Ensemble Force, keeping that kind of going. It's kind of doing its own thing, and in the meantime, we can do our thing. That's also why everything is kind of set up towards crit chance crit damage. This is a crit chance crit damage high-end setup, basically. We're not just going for the tick alone, because of course, yeah, with a Sawyer's, for instance, you can push that number up way higher than, for instance, a Coyote. But a Coyote, holistically, to me, makes the most sense here to make up for that crit chance, crit damage that we kind of need to get to decent numbers, and then so that we can kill with the main weapon, and then together with that we have a really strong tick. Not the highest, but strong enough. And then for our talent choices, we're going here with perfectly unstoppable force. I feel this should be just perfect unstoppable force. That is a perfectly fine name for it. But yeah, I went with perfectly unstoppable force, which I was a stickler for as well in the PTS, and when they kind of announced that they went with this wording. And here, of course, it is the backbone. That is the named Lengmo backpack that has this talent, this perfect talent. And what we get here is basically the same 5 stacks, but we get 2% more per stack. Now, if we were to want to use this by itself, what would generally happen is that, yeah, it is still worthwhile using, but if we're not using it, for instance, in a 3-piece as we're here with the LMG, you basically give up somewhat of damage because of the other brand bonuses. But here, of course, we're kind of using it in conjunction with an LMG, and we're getting that LMG bonus out of it. So overall, even in comparison to something like Vigilance or something on a normal Lengmo backpack, I feel overall this is well worth it. Here as well, even with 3 stacks, we're already at 21. And we can get stacks pretty quickly as well, of course, because overall this build, I tend to just use it mostly solo, so we can get going pretty quickly with a few kills. And I will prioritize going for enemies that I will kill quickly, starting off on some reds and such, for instance, just to get this stacked up, of course. And then we're pairing that here as well with glass. We'll be actually showing it as well with the perfect glass cannon version in a second. And I'll kind of run both in the gameplay parts. But this one is the Lengmo with the glass cannon. This one, of course, is a super unicorn. This will come with a blue core, so you need to find all 3 stats and then record it. This is best done basically by crafting for it and trying to get it that way, which is the way that I got it. This one's crafted. But as well, I'm actually going to say here, and might be a little bit controversial, that might be not even worth it per se. It is overall that I have it. It is the preferred way I run it, but it isn't a large enough difference to really go out of your way to try to get this super unicorn. And you can basically run the perfect glass cannon chest together with a Lengmo knee pad as an alternate version. You're basically giving up the Fox's Spur at that point. And that is actually a very fine enough setup for this as well, especially starting out. So don't per se go outright out for this Lengmo chest until maybe if you're like really like this build and you have nothing else to kind of farm for. That's the point to kind of go for this. Kind of like the Habsburg, you shouldn't just get them just to get them. Do it only if you're really going to use it quite often. It is a minor upgrade to this, which is, and it comes at a heavy cost if you don't accidentally just get one as a random drop here or there. Then yeah, of course, we're pairing it with the Coyote as its talents, and we're especially going for this mid-range buff of it. Where we get a little bit of crit chance out of it and a little bit of crit damage. We especially need a little bit of crit chance, crit damage to get up to that 60. We're now at 49.5 and 141 crit damage. So respectable numbers, but we kind of need that mid-range to really make it to reach 59.5 and really extract a lot from our crit damage. Then going actually to the other star of the show, if Lengmo is one of them, the other one is the Pesty. Here as well, to make a note to talk about that, we're going with a crit chance rolled Pestilence. In any build where you're really kind of relying on crit chance, crit damage, going with crit chance as the third stat on any and all LMGs, instead of DTA or rate of fire or the DTH, crit chance overall gives you the best overall gains as long as it is a crit chance based build. So there's, for instance, of course, the famous triple tick build for Pestilence as well, which we'll actually like in the future build showcase. There, you can make a case for DTA because we're not really a crit chance, crit damage based setup. Here, of course, the way that we have it here, we're very much are. So yeah, we're going crit chance third set. In the calculations as well, I'll show actually how much of a difference that does make because our tick would scale off of DTA, for instance, or tick does go up, but we lose so much more damage on the build end. Here then as well, I'm kind of pairing it with just some LMG here, the Sleipnir. Although seeing with this one especially as well, with the Fox's Prayer version, we can get a rifle in this, and especially if we kind of run out of ammo, the rifle is still very much bonus. Now, of course, a lot of our bonuses do not apply to that rifle, but at least we have the Fox's Prayer to kind of bump up its damage. The Contractor's still applying, of course, its DTA and such. Then, as well, having a TDI card custom for that skill tier, but this is, of course, more just for in group settings where we kind of use this for our Revive Hive settings. Although, as well, something like if you want to min-max it out, if you're using some of the skills and such, for instance, here with the Pulse, if I were to pull out my pistol and then Pulse, we get an extra skill tier, we get a tiny bit more duration on it, as we'll actually go see here. We have a little bit more effect duration from that. Minor things, but yeah, we can kind of min-max that way. And of course, actually, yeah, to talk about the Pestilence talent as well, as we kind of glossed over that. The Pestilence, the way that it works is that it basically applies a debuff on the enemy, specifically a debuff. It isn't a status effect or anything else. It is a debuff, and because of that as well, isn't affected by status effect or such. It is as well, just as with the Magic the Gathering, kind of reading the card kind of explains the card. Here, reading the talent explains the talent, except for if there's some wrong words in it, of course. Here, though, this one is fine. This is from year one still, and those are mostly fine as they did them a little bit more diligently, I would say. And then here's, yeah, hits apply debuff dealing 100% weapon damage over 10 seconds. This stacks up to 50 times. And whenever an enemy dies with this debuff, 100% of the stacks are transferred to an nearby enemy within 25 meters. So basically, hitting an enemy starts putting the debuff on them. The debuff does damage to them depending on how many stacks are on them, so how many hits have been made there. And then it scales off of weapon damage. Whenever the game basically talks about weapon damage, what it basically means is the non-crit hit. So one easy way actually to calculate out our maxed out Pestilence ticks would be just to take our non-crit hit on that certain enemy and then times 5 it in this case. So if we times 5 it, we basically get out our tick from that number. You can just derive it from that. And then, yeah, whenever that enemy dies from either you shooting them or from the tick or from any other source, as long as they die, the debuff will spread to a nearby enemy within 25 meters. So yeah, this is not infinite range, but it is quite wide and will spread by itself quite consistently. And what you can also do is try to sometimes get multiple stacks going, because it's not dependent on, for instance, the way that the Mosquito is, where you fire at one enemy and then if you fire at another enemy, do you lose the other stacks? No. If you fire at multiple enemies, you can have multiple stacks going. But what will happen is when one of them dies, eventually it will kind of like pull together and kind of come to like one super debuff on the enemy. And then as well, we're pairing that here with Gunner as our specialization. That is very much a good pick for any LMG. And 1 in 3 reloads being better, that weapon handling when standing still, the rate of fire when we get a kill. All of those are really good picks. We're kind of playing this as well, mostly solo. I would consider this mostly a solo build. I wouldn't consider this over strikers for group play, although it can stand its own there as well. Skills-wise, of course, we're going to go with this Revive Hive. It is too useful to give up a 1-up as we have it, and it will pick you up as well if you go down just solo. And then I'm pairing it here with the Scanner Pulse, but of course you could have a bunch of talents here, or a bunch of skills here. Pulse is very nice just to know where all of the enemies are at the start and kind of know where you kind of want to start your pesty ticks going, because especially if you're at the start able to kill a few things quickly, a few reds, instead of going for instance for an elite, we can get that unsubbable force kind of starting to go. That will help with further kills and such. So I do like having a pulse, and we'll use that here as well. Let's go to the build picture and kind of discuss it more there. And continuing on indeed with its build picture, here we have all of the stats up, of course, and this will be linked down below as well if you want to have a closer look to it. These are the build pictures from the build collection, and they basically lay out how the build is set up some of its stats and its talents and its or what brand bonuses goes for, and sometimes as well alternate versions, as we'll discuss in a sec. And yeah, we did see the build, of course, already with that crit chance bestie. The only thing to kind of make note of here is that, yeah, everything is with crit chance, crit damage, and especially crit damage wherever possible, except for one spot. That spot doesn't matter per se where it is, but you basically need one extra crit chance than you would need instead of just going all crit damages everywhere with that crit chance third stat there. We need this one crit chance. That lands us on this 49.5 together with a 141. With the Coyote at mid-range, of course, we're going to 59.5 and then 151. Close enough for government work, basically, to to get to those to the crit cap, basically close enough. Any trying to add anything more, like another 6 or something, which is really our only options because we don't have any weapon damages here, or damage or weapon mods here available to alter. Anything else over that would be, of course, a humongous waste because we would waste basically 5.5 out of a 6 crit chance mod. But yeah, we need basically one extra crit chance in there. I'm putting that here in the mods slot basically, but yeah, it could be on the Fox Spread, it could be on the contractors. Basically, it's free placement of that one wherever you want it to be. Yeah, that's the kind of what we want to go for to kind of get the crit chance crit damage nice on the Pestilence, because of course it doesn't have any mods for crit chance crit damage. It only then will have that third stat, which yeah, does hurt it a little bit on the DPS end, but of course, yeah, it is what it is, and we'll have to use it that way. And then as well here, actually, yeah, on the build picture, I'm showing it paired with a rifle. Here, though, still with with Boomerang. In the future, I will likely change this. Very much Killer would be my pick, especially as we kind of discussed. This is much more of a solo-ish, maybe small groups, 2-man, 3-man kind of thing setup. And there you go, Killer would work perfectly fine. Here we're showing the numbers. It's damage numbers with grade 25. And yeah, on grade 25, we hit pretty hard. And we have also the tick here. Then we have actually an alternate version. So what we could go with, as we kind of discussed, as a much cheaper version as well, is just to have a full red sacrifice chest, which isn't per se hard to get, of course. We're not recoring it or anything. Together with the Lengmo knee pads. Keeping this Lengmo basically off of the chest where it needs to be a super unicorn to fit in there. And then kind of pushing that Lengmo over here, getting a perfect sacrifice in, which of course has 5% more on its glass. And overall, if we kind of compare them here, what we see is actually that the crit hit on this one is actually higher than this, but actually the base hit on this one is a little bit higher. That's of course the difference of that 10 detox or this 8 detox being here from the Fox's Prayer. And we basically, on the crits, it's a little bit higher on the main crit, but it's actually lower, or actually on the headshot, it is actually higher on both. But then the tick as well is a little bit lower. It is actually just a tiny bit lower. Let's actually go to the calculation sheet where we'll kind of start comparing these as well. And we'll start on those calculations here. We have 3 of them in a row of multi-calculators. If you're not familiar with these are multi-calculators of my design. I use them quite a bit. They're also available, and I'll link to them down below where you can go and use them for yourself as well. But what is happening here is basically input happens down here, output happens up here, and we're mostly looking at comparing our outputs in burst and sustain. Although here as well, everything with the tick will be in red, everything with the DPS plus the tick. So we're basically taking a full tick and then putting it together with the DPS as like a combined DPS, because the tick, of course, is once per second. That's also one of the reasons that I kind of lean more towards having the build be very high on its DPS as well, because as we kind of see here, if we kind of start looking at it, is that the build itself here on burst DPS, and then as well with these kind of additions to it with our DTOC kind of at 90%, our DTA at 60%, our headshot at 20%. This is kind of the general picks that I generally go for comparing builds with, to try to keep them a little bit more fair, because especially if we're kind of just putting DTA always on and comparing maybe, let's say, an LMG, which has with some DTA from a contractors versus an AR, and then having its DTHP off or something. It's kind of a bad way to compare stuff. So yeah, we're kind of setting numbers, and then yeah, as well, headshot not to be always on because we don't have headshot 100%. So we're just I'm just picking these numbers basically. Together with that, we're putting in a grade 25 weapon, as that's what I have available. We could of course go up to grade 27, but I actually haven't updated any of my pestilences yet up to that. And that's kind of important here because we're using as well this upper right corner, this little block. This kind of shows our hit numbers in game, and I've checked that those align with what I have and have equipped. But then, yeah, we have the Lengmo glass version. So if we're starting here with basically the build as I showed it there, then together with that, it's stick. For the stick here on a build that doesn't have any weird multipliers or such, because for instance, yeah, earlier on I said it's basically the body shot without crit is the amount that it's times 5 is the amount that the tick is. That's kind of how we're calculating it here. But it's only basically that for the modifier or for the pools that apply. So for instance, if we had striker is a separate multiplier, does not actually go into this calculation. Our white damage hits would actually be non-crit hits basically, would be of course a little bit higher, but yeah, it wouldn't be times 5 that, because the striker stacks don't go in there. So as long as it's basically a high-end build, it is the times 5 as we kind of have them here. Later on for this, we'll be actually having a few striker setups, and we'll actually calculate them out correctly. But yeah, what we have here is everything comparing kind of to this top slot in its percentages. If we take the burst DPS of the build itself, we have kind of like 9.5-ish with these settings. Then the tick at most is basically an 1.48 as we have it here, or 4.6. That is 15% of our DPS. To try to get this number much higher than this, we give up way too much. For instance, putting in a Sawyer instead of the Coyote that we have there, we would give up way too much of our burst DPS to kind of attain a little bit more tick. And to me, it is very much, this build is very much a balance of the bestie tick and also still hitting hard. That's what I kind of go for. That's my philosophy around it. And that's also why we're combining basically one tick, although of course this is, in the game it kind of works differently. Sometimes you have maybe even multiple ticks going on, or you have like 60 stack on this guy and 60 stacks on that. We could go with 1,000 different permutations. I'm just going to stick with one, which is one full tick, 100 stacks, which of course requires 100 hits to get there as well. You got to remember that as well. It isn't a quick thing to stack up, but especially in longer fights, it will have a full stack kind of going around. And yeah, we're kind of looking then at the DPS combined here, and we're basically getting out of that talent, we're getting around a 15% if we're kind of getting this tick going. But there is, of course, some value to damage just being done, as we'll kind of discuss in the gameplay. Damage just being done without you actually firing to enemies as well. That might be in cover, that might be somewhere that you can't really reach them, that may have ran away, which are trying to maybe heal as well. It will stagger enemies continuously here and there, even with a few stacks on them. And that is the value of this build. It isn't per se just shown in its DPS or its combined DPS plus tick. It is much more, when you use it, you notice how useful it is to basically have some damage going around. And especially on longer fights, how powerful that can be as well. Try to show later on. Then we have here as well, as we have the Coyote, of course. If we were to have the Coyote, we're setting it here at 15 to 25. What happens if it's at 0 to 15 and at 25 plus? This build is, of course, very optimized to be in that mid-range buff. We're kind of extracting as much from it with that 49.5 as we can. And of course, then the 10 crit damage is also used well. So what we see is basically if you have the long range buff, we do lose about 3%. When we have the short range buff, we lose about 4% ish of our DPS. And that's kind of fine. We kind of want to live in that mid range, try to be mostly there, and especially as well, it's better to be the way that we're set up. Better to be a little bit longer range than try to be shorter range. The difference though is not much here, of course. Here then as well, we have actually just as a comparison point, I've actually just a perfect glass cannon set up, just the Fox Sprayer plus contractors, 3-piece Providence, Coyote setup with just the M249 without a talent yet added into it. And we also kind of see that is around the same damage as the Pestilence, because the M249 is, of course, the base weapon for this. There as well, it could have 150 rounds. It has the same reload there. But that by itself already is basically 2% ahead. That comes down to, yeah, that weapon having 3 spots to put either crit chance or crit damage. And this Pestilence not having that, of course. This is also with the crit chance third stat. This is before a talent. That's kind of also the thing. This build isn't per se the hardest hitting LMG build, because if we kind of introduce killer, let's say, to this, and we just go into this cell and go plus 70, so for when it is active, and we go back, yeah, it's even with a tick going around, this build, a perfect glass cannon build with just an high-end LMG with a good talent, can definitely outperform this, and very consistently as well. And yeah, that's something to consider, because yeah, this isn't per se a really high damage build. But what it is a high damage build because it's a glass red, but it isn't per se the hardest hitting with the main shots. But of course, and even combined, it doesn't really actually match up to other builds with better talents. But of course, it can do special things, as we'll kind of see in its gameplay. Here as well, we have a Obliterate Striker with an MG5 instead. Yeah, that's even, of course, much higher, and even much higher sustain as well, as the M249 is actually a much worse sustainer. Again, without the talent here, so we would gain even more once we put in killer or measured or something like that. So do consider that. But this has its own place as well, and I've been quite enjoying it, because yeah, I do have these builds, but yeah, I've been picking this one quite consistently as well. Yeah, let's move on to the second one. And with this second one, indeed, we kind of have a setup here. It is important for me to point out that basically we have 6 different builds here comparing. It's with the 2 rows. On the second row, we're kind of calculating out the tick as well. And the way that these are ordered, and also the percentages are kind of comparing to the ones in this top slot. But yeah, it's basically the burst and the sustain on these 2 points. And then the red one is the tick number. And then the green one is the combined number of burst plus 1 tick, basically 1 full 100 stack tick. And then, yeah, they're comparing kind of to this top slot. What we have here is actually the Lengmo glass, as we had it, as I have it there in game. But we'll also actually show it with the perfect glass cannon, as I kind of talked about with the Lengmo being then on the knee pad instead of the Fox Sprayer. Those 2 are the 2 main versions I would kind of consider for this. What we see is actually that the burst on the perfect glass is kind of higher. Same for the sustain, a little bit higher actually for that setup. So why would we go for that? The answer is kind of a little bit in here. The tick on the other one is on the Lengmo setup is a tiny bit higher. And then together with that, the combines are basically the same. But where would we even consider this Lengmo version then, if this one is a bit higher, but we just lose a tiny bit of tick? That difference between 50% more incoming damage and 60% incoming damage is definitely felt. Now, it isn't as big of a difference, but together with this is also not a big difference. So we kind of go with with our numbers here between the 2. I would prefer overall to have that 50% incoming instead of 60. you do definitely feel it, especially against enemies that kind of do more chip damage than just a hard hitter. Of course, a sniper is going to take both of these to health gate. But against an SMG kind of pushing in on you and getting a few hits in, you definitely feel the difference between 50 and perfect glass cannon and not perfect glass cannon. So that is kind of my reasoning for that. And then also the tick is a tiny bit higher, and the tick is actually useful to be a tiny bit higher, although it isn't a significant difference. One other setup that I quite often see as well, and we'll kind of actually show it in the game, as actually the way that my loadout is saved is actually in that way, as I kind of went way too far, is with 4 pieces of Lengmo there, as we kind of see it. But then one of the way that gets recommended quite a bit is to run it like this without the coyote, and then you can also go sacrifice, and then you can keep the Fox's Prayer and the contractors to have the 3-piece Lengmo. The downside of this, especially in kind of the way that we're kind of going, and the reason I do have the mask is actually, so this would be a good setup if somebody else is providing the coyote. If we kind of go back and we kind of look at this one here, which is that setup, but then ran solo, and then we alter our crit chance and crit damage, and actually we go for this 55, which is better than going over 60 basically, which we one more mod would do. This is actually a better balance of crit chance, crit damage than losing another crit damage here as well and actually being at 60. And that one as just, it loses so much on the burst and sustain. And while the tick is actually higher, and you could maybe even argue that, that might be something to go for, I feel the combined of them, which is this green number here, is when compared to that Lengmo setup with the coyote, the combined is so much lower. And I kind of like having, I feel this is too far, maybe giving up too much, just barely giving up too much for the tick instead of going for the DPS, because we do lose quite a bit on that DPS. That coyote is a very useful piece and a very strong piece. Then as well, we have actually 2 strikers here. We have strikers with a glass chest with Cheska. We have a strikers with a sacrifice with perfect glass chest. And kind of comparing as well, their DPS wise, of course, the strikers will with this pestilence hit much harder, especially at 100 stacks, which is what this is at. It's hitting much harder, but then actually the tick is of course much lower. Its combined, though, is still much higher. And this was kind of the thing that I was looking at the start of the season. And one of my things was as well, just, okay, if we want to use the Bessie, just use it on Striker. It's kind of good enough. And, overall, you do more damage. That one was kind of clear up front, as we might have guessed. But there is actually some value solo, and one of the reasons I don't per se just run it on a strikers and go with this Lengmo setup is that there is value to that tick being quite a bit higher than this, basically. It's going into at least 1 million, and maybe even a little bit higher than that, really does help out to make it be able to kill. And that is one of the things that I'll try to show in gameplay as well. But of course, we could go strikers and kind of get still pretty good numbers out of it. And then as well, just versus running an perfect glass cannon, just normally, and then with the pestilence on it. So not even specking towards the 3-piece Lengmo, going with 3-piece Providence with sacrifice gift. There as well, I would say the specialized build is overall better. It doesn't per se win in the burst and sustain, as we kind of see here, and the reason for that is that the Lengmo 3-piece is actually really good. And as well, of course, here we're going sacrifice gift, so we're going a 25% versus a 35%, which might not be that fair actually. Let's actually bump this up to 35. I kind of now realize. And then we kind of see that actually the perfect glass cannon, if we were to go, but the thing is we couldn't go with the backbone just outright. We would have to change our stats a little bit because now we have 1-piece Lengmo in there. So we would lose a little bit of in that case, crit damage. And then you would lose out here. But going sacrifice gift, overall is still even an option, but I feel the Lengmo setup is better for it overall. Then as well, we have just one final one quickly for a Pestilence with a crit chance, Pestilence with a DTA, 3rd stat. The DTA, of course, will apply to our ticks. Then we have the numbers as we had it with the first one, where we have basically the burst and the sustain, and then the tick, and then the DPS plus tick combined. And what we see here when we kind of compare them all together is actually that the Bestie with a DTA, it's losing, well, just under 2% on its burst and sustain. It's because here we're comparing basically the tick versus the ticks versus each other, and the DPS plus ticks versus each other. The tick is kind of 3.44% higher on the DTA version, but then actually the combined of them is a little bit lower. It isn't a humongous difference. This is still just 1% and a little bit. But overall, I feel having the build hit a little bit harder instead of the tick going a little bit harder. But yeah, you could go either way if you, for instance, already have a DTA one and you don't wanna reconfigure it. Although as well, if it is graded, you can actually reconfigure it and it will keep its grading. As just to put that out there, as I know a bunch of people still don't know. But yeah, overall, we could go either way, but yeah, I'm going with the crit chance version here. But this is one of the few places where DTA could be made, or you could make a case for it for LMGs, and that is just because it also applies to the tick, of course. It's that tick that kind of brings up its numbers just barely. So yeah, let's take this now into some gameplay and then discuss it further there. And for our outing here, we'll start actually with kind of the cheaper version, as we kind of discussed it there. Which is, yeah, taking out the Fox's Prayer, putting that Lengmo piece to that knee pad slot as we had it, and opening up a slot for the Sacrifice to slot into there. Also here, I'm going to first use it. While I do have a grade 25 Pesty at the ready, we'll use that later. Let's start with a grade 01 to kind of just show, you know, what this build can do, even if it's not per se at its best. And then we'll later on switch over to having its best in its best clothes. And yeah, let's go do a few control points with this. And here we're coming up to demolition site. And yeah, we're gonna as well take this time to kind of show a cheese here. I'm hoping most people know it already. We have it here without directives, without the modifier as well. We might show it off with the modifier in a bit, but first off, just, you know, kind of the basics, just also so I can more easily talk. As we kind of talked about, we want targets to kind of easy kills to get our backpack talent, our unstoppable force going. That lady is a pretty good target. One thing that Pesty builds always were pretty good for is control points, as we're kind of doing here. And one of the big reasons for that is that enemies will spawn here before all enemies are dead. And what I mean by that is, for instance, with a territory control or a public execution, the enemies start spawning, the next wave spawns when every enemy of the past spawn is dead. That means that actually the pesty ticks don't get to spread around. And yeah, here we're reaching that point. Notice how that red already died. This purple is going to die to the tick. And every time that the tick actually jumps around, it completely refreshes to full. It goes back to its full duration. And that's actually one of the things. So here I'm killing this one. My tick is kind of killing that one. I'll finish it off. That is the strength of this. You will oftentimes have the tick kind of moving around, killing some bunch of stuff. And especially on a control point like this, on heroic, with this, where there's enough enemies as well kind of spawning, and they are spawning as well. Once one enemy is left alive, the next wave is spawning. This one as well, of course. I picked one that is kind of compact, but also we're going to kind of show it here. We're going to show it here with a little bit of cheese, as we oftentimes like doing here. And that is that the reason I didn't call them in here is that there is a much better way to do it. First of all, to not have, for instance, these guys to deal with. As we'll just take them out of it. But the enemies just spawn from one position here. They have one sewer that they spawn from. Also, this is one of the few places where you can stand outside of the zone and actually still get going. They spawn from behind this statue. So instead of letting them actually get out and spread out and be a nuisance, we're just gonna start murdering them here as they come out of the sewer. Because yeah, they are of course moving very slow. And here actually, so we have a full pesty stack going. I'm just gonna help it along a little bit. And the next wave will kind of spawn before the previous one generally does. But versus there, we killed it actually too fast between the two. But yeah, we got some stacks going. One of the things you may have already noticed as well is that the marker for it is kind of broken, basically. It doesn't always show up. It doesn't always show the correct amount of duration for it. It doesn't sometimes even show up at all. And that's one of the downsides. So for instance, there, that enemy, I refresh the duration on it when I shoot it. You will continuously refresh it if you're shooting at the enemy. But then, yeah, as it jumps around as well, it would. And there it weakened that enemy to make it very easy for us to kind of finish it off. And there as well, that's kind of the way to cheese this, and now we have to kind of wait for our allies to get here. Actually, while they're coming, let's go actually do this territory control over on the side here, because they'll take their sweet time. And we can at the end of it as well, once they've captured, we'll still be close enough that they'll capture it. Because for instance, on the other hand, we have things like territory controls here, where once I kill the very last enemy, that's when the next wave spawns. So you will always basically lose your pestilence stick. That's why, for instance, control points are really a good way to go for the pestilence. But here as well, so getting my unstoppable force up, we have a red, we have a bunch of purples, but actually that rusher as well is a pretty quick kill. So yeah, I'm gonna start on this red, I'm gonna go for the rusher. Get that going. I'm actually gonna reload here. My tick will likely kill this guy. But I want to be ready basically for the next wave. And this is the strength of the pulse. I don't need to guess where the enemy is coming from. I can exactly know. I'm actually gonna hoping that would spread. But yeah, that was the sometimes as well. Mechanicals and such will actually receive the debuff. Here, the sniper is actually getting staggered. You saw her getting staggered there and losing her aim. That's also one of the strengths of a pesty setup, is that it will go around kind of like Negotiator. Has the same trait a little bit, where it will, when you're marking multiple targets and you're hitting one of them, basically, it will stagger the others. And it is definitely noticeable how much that actually keeps you alive as you're kind of going. Yeah, let's get our completion here. And we get the key chest as well. And I'm pretty sure that they captured demolition site as well. Let's jump over there. I'm gonna go get my loot, but yeah, let's go do another control point with this similar setup. And for that one, we'll do the No Hope Hotel. Also, just to for those that may have never seen it before, if you're wondering why it's called No Hope Hotel, it is. If you line it up kind of with these pillars here, yeah, we have no rights, no hope, no unity. That's why it's No Hope Hotel. We have a patrol leaving here as well. Detected. And we have a patrol over there. Actually, I'm gonna go deal with these guys because they'll join our fight anyway as well. So I might get down here, but that's kind of fine. I kind of needed to hit the weak point on that thing, but we didn't in the end. I'm gonna take the reload. That other guy seemed more interested in my other. I especially don't want to aggro the control point yet, if we can avoid that. But yeah, of course, open world quite often has the downsides of, yeah, there being a ton of stuff. I'll just kill the owner. But yeah, I really needed to hit the side of that thing, or the side-mounted ammo pouch, but yeah, I didn't. Let's get up here. We haven't aggroed these guys yet. I'm also, yeah, not going to call it in again. Generally, I just don't, if I have the choice. The only difference is especially that you can't get rogues unless you actually call them in before the last enemy dies. One thing I kind of want to do is push up on them And actually as well, be smart about some things. So for instance, that medic is kind of annoying. I'm actually going to toss a grenade there. That's going to be actually my opening gambits, basically. I'm going to get some stacks going. I'm going to come back to that guy. Kind of keeping a few enemies busy. Use the tools you have available to you to kind of do what you need to do. And especially, yeah, foam grenades. Not the most useful in combat, but especially when before combat has really taken off. Well worth grabbing. And yeah, we see kind of on that engineer, he has pesty ticks. It doesn't show a bar underneath it.
Let's go.
And that's one of the annoyances that can exist with the pestilence. I'm also gonna put a ton of stacks on that. And now we have basically 2 half stacks kind of going of like pretty high amounts. We do want them to kind of spread before they run out. But they will as well, because they are killing the enemies, and yeah, when it spreads, and yeah, they're spread, and that guy has a full stack on him, and he's gone. Here, quite often, I would go sit on the street there and kind of shoot at all 3. We'll actually hang back here a little bit. I'm just gonna take this high ground. One thing with positioning, especially as well, is what you want to do is, for instance, this seems like a pretty obvious place to take cover, right? But the issue with this is, if I'm shooting over there and the wave spawns over there, and I'm kind of busy with them, that wave can kind of shoot me. If you can shoot everything, everything can shoot at you. What I like more is either, for instance, here you have 2 options. You have you can fall back a little bit and kind of use this kind of as cover and then kind of shoot those ways, or I just use tall cover, as we all often do, of course. We have some tall cover over here, just using cover, but not the cover system. Anyway, we're going to call them in this way as well, splitting it up into 2 fights. If I had a convoy coming up my butt, if I had other things, an extra patrol or some such, that's much less of an issue if you split it up into 2 fights. And I'm gonna hang here, use this tall cover, get shots of opportunity out. This shotgunner is actually going to come in a annoying moment, but yeah, I have some place where I can ring around the Rosium. That grenade was well timed off of the grenade guy, or grenade gal, honestly. And yeah, with a full pesty tick, it will actually kill an elite within the time. So one thing that you can kind of look at is with a full stack, we have, of course, we know our numbers basically, and here, even this like 1.4 that we have at max stacks, you can kind of do times 10. That is what your damage per pesty ticks will be. Kind of damage per mag, but then for that. So if the enemy's health is less than that number, that is the big difference maker. That's also why I'm kind of, yeah, at the start of the season, I was very much, just use striker. Now I'm very much more, yeah, there is definitely some benefits to having it be over 1 million, because yeah, over 1 million means that at 10 stacks or at 10 seconds, what will happen is that it is over 10 million, and that is also around, well, 9.79, I think, is the amount of million is the amount of an elite's health and armor pool combined. So then we have basically enough damage per mag kind of, or damage per tick to kind of actually kill an elite once it's kind of going at full blast. This guy chose to go live a different life. He was just off to find his new destiny. But yeah, this isn't Destiny, this is Division, so we just divided them by 0. Yeah, let's take it now to our other setup, and let's maybe go do some bounties with that. And for that, we're gonna go back to actually what we kind of had the build picture based around, which is, yeah, that Lengmo chest, that super unicorn, that super annoying piece to get. But as we saw with the numbers, honestly, I'm feeling kind of like maybe I shouldn't per se recommend this setup. But this setup definitely also has some valuable sides. As we kind of saw, the tick is a tiny bit higher. We're losing a little bit DPS. But overall, yeah, it is it is to me a tiny improvement over the full glass version, especially as well as our damage incoming is also 10% less. You do feel that difference. You definitely do feel that difference, and that's kind of why I do lean this way. As well, we're opening it up to have a decently easy rifle secondary. We'll put that in. We might actually use it. And as well, here we're stepping it up to my grade 25 Pestilence for my stash. We're pulling that out. And we're kind of going all in on the damage. And yeah, let's go do some bounties with this. And here we're coming up on a hyena bounty here in Constitution Hall. They seem to have found somebody to tango with already. And they seem to be losing. Which, yeah. Let's go see if they're willing to swap partners and you know, if we can take this dance. And for this as well, we've turned on 3 directives, somewhat in line with if we're going all in on kind of the damage end, you know, might as well also have some directives here. We do have I've kept up no regen and Pistolero of this season. We do have cool skills, Fog of War, and then also the special ammo directive. Especially cool skills here has led me to actually drop my hive. I do like having my pulse and using it. I'll risk not having the hive, and especially with this setup as well, with the tick being, or well, just either of the setups kind of, we have so much damage in our ticks sometimes that we can kind of hide and let the tick someone, you know, take someone down basically. And that does mean as well that especially some of the later enemies, sometimes when you would get kind of taken down, I can just hide and just let the tick do the work. And we don't per se need that hive, even on a glass build. I know a lot of people are very adamant that, you know, you can't run glass all the time. No, you can't. You definitely can. Not only can you, we did. We used to quite a bit. Here I'm going to go for some of the easier to kill red targets. Again, getting my unstoppable force to be unstoppable perfectly even. And I'm kind of getting that going. As well, when 2 ticks merge, like on that person, it does actually also refresh. So it refreshes basically whenever anything happens to it. If it gains stacks or such, or if it gets a kill and jumps around, it basically always just gains its complete timer reset, basically. That is actually one of the big strengths of Pestilence. And yeah, if it really didn't have that, it wouldn't have much. Here, with going from fight to fight, of course, we're going to lose Unstoppable Force. Unstoppable Force doesn't stay around for long enough for it to be carried over between big fights, unless they're like right next door. But we'll get it back. Well, that was pretty close to a decent 511 backpack. If you're wondering why I would even be like looking at those, you may want to look at some of my other build showcases. Again, we're gonna pulse here. The pulse is a very handy tool. I want definitely the sniper gone. That sniper is easy to kill. That sniper is easy to kill. Both of those are actually, of course, very dangerous enemies. My tick is actually on someone. There was whatever I put on that sniper, that was actually on someone. It didn't actually show up, but yeah, I've also there then put a fresh one in. And that's kind of the annoying thing, not seeing that marker. I hope they fix it, basically, pretty soonish. But here, just with a heroic bounty,
target spotted.
We also have, of course, a bunch of enemies to kind of get a bunch of stacks on. I was kind of pre-firing there, but maybe I was a little bit too early. One of the tactics you can definitely use with all LMGs, basically, of course, LMGs as they become, as you keep firing them, they become much more and much more accurate over time. And what you can use that for is pre-firing basically a position, and then if the enemy comes into it, you're already kind of stable and accurate. And we're putting a pretty big stack on that heavy. I'm just gonna make sure that that stack kind of keeps going there. I might actually foam this guy because yeah, the combination of the two might might be too annoying. But yeah, we can use all our tools. And here, for instance, for a little bit, we had kind of 2 ticks at close to full stack going, or at... And yeah, technically you can do more than even the tick plus DPS combined if you kind of get that going. But those situations are so rare. It's basically... it only really happens on bounties and when you have multiple names out, or in boss fights where there's multiple names, let's say Wall Street or such. And yeah, there you can, of course, kind of like with other builds, kind of increase your DPS that way. Yeah, let's go find another spot to do a bounty in, and we'll continue talking about this build. And here, while heading to that next bounty there, we'll take Strike Team India. We have a named group here. Let's actually take them out as well. And here especially, what I want to do with it is... This fight, for instance, as well, is a point where we have basically 5 enemies. Unless, for instance, a mechanical gets spawned, like maybe an RC car from that lady. So actually, we will get our ensemble force basically on the last enemy. When this guy dies, now it's 5 stacks. But even, of course, as we kind of discussed, even at 3 stacks, it's 21%. It's kind of competitive with vigilance, because we would go for that brand bonus anyway, or we're already going for Lengmo anyway. So we can't kind of gain something from a brand bonus there. Not at least in the kind of the layouts that we're kind of going for. So it still is overall one of the better choices. But yeah, the other options would be either to go vigilance, but yeah, you would kind of lose it whenever you get hits. And together with that, of course, as well, composure or companion could be used in certain ways, but neither I would kind of seriously consider. But here as well, we're kind of starting it up. One thing as well, let's say we can kind of do it. I'm gonna, although no, that's not gonna be enough time. Kind of left that enemy to die to that while I kind of rushed up. We might be able to, actually, just barely. If we get a kill fast enough, of course. No, just barely. But yeah, if we could get a kill fast enough, we would have reset the timer on it, of course. We were just a little bit, we reached the room just in time, but yeah, we would have still needed to actually get a kill in. Although, of course, a lot of these enemies are not that hard. An assaulter does scare me somewhat from a named. So there, for instance, we had actually a full stack kind of on that mini tank already, and then the heavy died also with a full stack. The downside of that is that, yeah, you can't go over 100 stacks. When they kind of merge on that enemy, you just lose whatever the extra of it was. Yeah, we have a full stack on the boss. Although, yeah, we did lose it there. I should have kind of tried to refresh it earlier. Or on the named, yeah, not the boss per se, because that's usually a term reserved for the last guy. And yeah, pulse is really handy for some reasons. I don't want to per se push down because I don't know what line of sight that turret had. And I don't want to get murdered by turret because they're actually kind of hard to hit sometimes. And they might just have a sliver somewhere where they can't see you, and yeah, they will. At the end of the day, even though, for instance, in this case, I'm not perfect glass, I'm still glass, and that does hurt pretty quickly. The zone as well is gear mods, so yeah, not a bad place to check for some loot. I'll even get this one. What I should get as well, just because we were trying to get in here as quickly as possible, I went the quicker way. But actually, there's a key chest back here, and we have keys, so let's use them. Because if nothing else, sometimes these, well, we'll have a Acosta, of course, exotic components, very nice. But then, as well, just the 100 resources can be very handy as well. being kept in combat here, I'm gonna make sure that I'm not, per se, in grave danger coming around the corner. And here again as well, one of the things with positioning, so I could take cover there and kind of shoot at stuff, but much better than that, just poke out just enough of yourself to shoot at a certain enemy. Preferably also only one enemy. And this mini gun dog is definitely one of those places where, yeah, the difference is very much felt between perfect and non-perfect glass on your chest. And we have kind of a full stack going. I'm actually gonna try to get it to go onto a named here, and I did. I weakened that guy pretty heavily, and once it jumped to the sniper, just one-tapped him out. Sometimes here as well, because the last fight is basically just above us, sometimes it, if it, for instance, was on a mini tank or something that dies a little bit later, sometimes it moves upstairs. Mini tanks are actually very handy to use in that way because the stack can move to them, but then they will usually die later than the way. Whenever the last enemies are dead, basically, when they don't have any black disc around them, they will self-deconstruct, they will self-destruct, and letting them do that as well can be kind of handy because the stack might go to them and they might actually transfer to someone else. Same for instance, the lawnmower, the lawnmowers from Outcast or stuff like that. And yeah, again, we'll open up with putting down that. Actually, we won't go all in on the named. Let's get these two guys out just to, yeah, get again those unstoppable force stacks going. And yeah, that stack jumping over to him made it reset to full. And he's an easy kill from that point. That's kind of the strength of this. You can very much, you don't have to expose yourself to the strongest enemies until much later. You can kind of just let this weaken them, stagger them and such as well. And especially on reds and purples like grenadiers and such, once that stack is kind of going around, quite often will not even have the ability to kind of toss a grenade because the second they do, they might get hit by that and then they get staggered out of it. Yeah, let's take this actually into some group play as well, just to show that off a little as well. And yeah, we're gonna matchmake our way into some missions. We're gonna keep the build as was with the Grade 25 Pesty. I wanted to show here again as well, whenever, as I've not shown it for a while, whenever we matchmake for a mission, there's actually a handy trick that is handy to know. If you go into your social, we got an invite there. I can actually go onto this name here, pending invite, and it might show a zone, but in this case, it's actually showing us exactly the mission. So yeah, Federal Emergency Bunker, which makes sense as well, as the game really likes putting you in your invaded missions if you haven't completed your invasion, and I haven't on this character, so I was kind of expecting uninvaded mission, which Federal Emergency Bunker is. They're kind of, at the start of it, they are running two directives. Modifiers are on. I'm gonna actually, yeah, we'll run it. Oh yeah, my modifiers are set and on. We'll actually run this here with modifiers. One of the things, of course, with this season's modifiers is that they're very powerful, range-based. The By the Teeth does apply to our Pestilence as well. So if we were to get long range or use one of the actives to kind of make long range happen at other ranges, yeah, that can be a very powerful tool for us. I'm going to chain that heavy, kind of get on this side, kind of get some free clear air for myself. I'm kind of expecting nothing much to get out of here. And the reload of the Pestilence is one of its biggest downsides. And as always with these, we'll also go get all the crates, because there's one back here to get. But looking at people's skills and stuffs, they seem to really like the repair drone, which is kind of odd. Actually, yeah, we'll go get the resources here. I thought somebody was already jumping downstairs. It's like, we'll skip the resources. I'm full on something. We can fix that. But for now, we'll just follow them in. Here as well at the elevator, I might actually take a moment to somewhat inspect my allies. One handy thing to kind of look at is inspecting your allies, knowing through that what they're kind of running. You can kind of from that, to me as well, kind of make a value judgment on how experienced the player kind of is. If the build is kind of, you know, horrendous, we can grab some conclusions from that. Sometimes you might see interesting stuff as well. But yeah, we always inspect just to know. For instance, there I saw a bunch of strikers. None of them kind of set up perfectly. There were some blue second stats or minor stats and stuff going on. But I know enough to know that there's enough damage here, especially with the modifier, to kind of get through this. I'm gonna take the heal here. And a pulse as well, actually. I should actually grab back that revive hive. And actually, let's do that here, just to not be a burden on others. I'm gonna grab my own revive hive just to have it as well for
system disrupted.
Get others up. Although the disruption from Black Tusk, of course,
System reactivated.
if we get hit by that at the moment that we get downed, basically. And here, actually, yeah, my stacks is kind of moving around, and it's gonna actually kill most of the things upstairs there, which is kind of nice, of course.
Take a look at what they've been pulling from the wreckage.
Here, once somebody hits this button, they'll start spawning on the back. I'm actually gonna go get set up somewhat for that.
Download complete.
They spawn upstairs here, so it's good to kind of set up here and to be able to shoot upstairs right away. I'm gonna kind of aim that way. You see the big stack coming. They are at long range, so that's kind of nice. And yeah, one of the things that happens with, of course, health scaling kind of going up for us being in a group, together with enemies and such. Well, I kind of talked about this being one of my more... I prefer to mostly play it kind of solo. It still works out well in groups as well, just because, yeah, the scaling goes up, so the enemies are much chunkier, so we get to have more stacks on them, more continuous stacks kind of going. But I feel in these kind of situations, I would be better off just being another striker, for instance, just upfront damage. Stuff doesn't stay alive long enough for the tick to be a very important factor. Although actually in this certain situation, I'm likely to be still one of the top damage dealers here. Especially as well, having a little bit of knowledge about how to use the modifier well is kind of handy. Because I'm staying kind of in long range there, instead of pushing a little bit closer. It would be nice if this guy wasn't body blocking as much as he is, but he is, and he is.
Immediate medical assistance needed.
And I'm gonna actually use my...
Agent down.
Yeah, I'm just gonna get him by hand.
System restored.
I was gonna use my hive, but then I get disrupted. And I'm gonna go set up here. Stellite is very nice for ST as well, although just for stacking purposes. Because yeah, we can get those stacks on that enemy, and then once they jump around, they're just jumping around, of course. When they land on an enemy without Stellite, although that one is also Stellite, then they'll be at full blast. I'm gonna try to, and that's also why I kind of set up back here. Try to catch. What I should do actually is shoot downstairs.
An agent needs assistance.
Let's pulse in the middle here. That enemy might be dangerous. This is one of the places where I very much enjoy having an Eclipse player with us, because yeah, they can kind of they can deal with enemies upstairs. Suppression, of course, is one thing to consider as well. That's also why I kind of don't like running it in groups per se, because I will suppress stuff, and yeah, that can be annoying or be, you know, something people don't like seeing. But yeah, you just sometimes have to watch out a little bit with that. We'll take this loot, and then of course Take the key chest upstairs there as well. Okay, knows about it. Also just gonna check for loot on that side. And there, for instance, we got 100 steel from that key chest. As always, why it's kind of handy to know where key chests are and grab their contents. I'm just gonna wait for my allies. One of the things in a group setting, which is oftentimes handy to do, is just, wait for at least 3 people kind of. Alright, that's the light kind of there, helping with the amount of stacks we're kind of putting out in. Even a small thing. Keep away from that guy because he'll get us shocked that way. Because when warhounds explode, they'll do nasty things to you. Because, for instance, in this setting, and that's also one of the downsides, for instance, in running it in a group setting, I'm not per se getting all of the kills. I'm actually getting, for instance, in this case, basically none of the kills, as I have 0 stacks of, this is something that basically a lot of teams do, which is just all push up to there, but yeah, they keep spawning still for a bit. So it's much safer to just kind of hold back a little, because I want my wave even. That wasn't too smart of me. I actually kind of went for the weak point. But that was always the last. I mean, whatever. Oh, actually, not really. Anyway, jumped actually to them. And then here we have a room that is kind of somewhat random in its spawns, but very fixed in other points. Because, it spawns, for instance, always, its first wave is up there. But then the side waves are basically random. So we don't per se know which one we're getting when. There's basically a few fixed spawns, which is that, which is also in a second 2 sniper dogs and a sniper, or 2 snipers as well, which will likely be the next kind of wave-ish. No, bottom right. I should bottom right first. But then in the middle of each wave, we might get a random left or right spawn, kind of. Which is kind of interesting with Axeman. And then, we have some mini tank with 2 dudes spawn. This is a sniper spawn. And then it ends always with 2 heavies spawning in 4-man, 1 heavy in solo and 2-man, I think. This is the mini tank one. Hopefully we'll get the heavies right after. And the mini tank's just shooting them and loading on them. I saw that exclamation points there, so I was ready for him to come out of there. Hoping it's the heavies now. No. And one of the things to do as well, we're running gunner, it's quite often handy to just kind of keep your butt in one place. Oh. Everybody kind of went upstairs where they can't shoot at these guys. Isn't too great, but there's the heavies. Those heavies can shoot through that door. We can't. So it's kind of dangerous until they're kind of out. And I'll still do a bunch of damage here, which is kind of wasted. So for instance, there, my pesty ticks on those heavies isn't really actually that well set. Yeah, neither of those have chevrons. We'll just leave them behind to kind of keep up with my allies, but yeah, I've got a feeling they're going to engage. Yeah. Going back for that loot would take too much time. And it was 2 marksman rifles. So, unless it was a 13 PFE marksman rifle, I'm kind of okay leaving it. But yes, quite often it will be wasted damage in some ways. Oh, miscounted, I thought that. Or already. I'm just setting up for the... I need to interact here. Next is the dog room here, where we'll have a lot of dogs. There actually as well. One of the things with the Pestilence is they go underneath Warhound armor. Not heavies and such, but with Warhounds they do. They basically damage their... not invade. It's the invaded version. You don't need to shoot any fires. But yeah, we'll basically damage the health underneath their armor plates. And yeah, we're gonna of course get some big stacks going here. Should I actually grab the jammer? Actually, I might still quickly grab a sticky. Because the thing to use here is very much... I should watch out. Well, Requital has been defanged heavily. If I'm at my health gate, yeah, it's still gonna murder me.
System curtailed.
And I'm kind of saving my sticky for in a second. If I can have uptime on it.
System reactivated.
And I'll take the full heal here.
An agent needs assistance.
And I need to
System disrupted.
be a little bit closer to be in close range. One thing I haven't used yet actually is my active, which I should be better about.
System restored.
I'm gonna use it here in a second for these heavies. I have prime time, which makes mid-range long range. Here it would actually be kind of hard to have long range, I feel.
Agent down.
But mid-range is much more doable, and my mid-range has then by the teeth active on it. And that fight's kind of over.
Malfunctioning.
Got a fully random liberty. But those stacks underneath kind of doing their work. Definitely not the cleanest tedious room, but wasn't too bad. And here we have the two heavies. Also, I'm gonna try to jump down, but that didn't work. I'm just gonna go for the chains right away. I'll disable them for a second. And we'll go towards the boss room. And the invaded boss here is much easier and faster than the than the normal boss. We have a long boss fight around it. We'll just catch him as he comes out, and then there's basically one wave that likely will spawn around it.
Electronic device detected.
I'm actually gonna set up on this side. I'm hoping somebody else hits it. I kind of want to be here usually. Hoping they push the button. I know these two, I have no idea where they are. I'm gonna time it with that Warhound.
An agent needs assistance.
And it seems they haven't ever done the invaded version of this mission. We do want to kill the name as quickly as we can. That will make it so no more waves spawn.
Feeling dizzy.
Files transferred.
This looks like troop orders based on the intel you found earlier. Well, this is a good
Okay,
find.
let's get our completion
Knowing our
here.
enemies'
I'm
intentions
curious
will help us
about
defend
our
against
end
them.
stats and how we kind of competed against our
done.
allies.
Looks
But here,
like
of course,
the intel
it's
you
very
found
much
to all our
the
allies.
modifier was on. That helps quite a bit with our damage. And yeah, I'm kind of having an expectation here. But yeah, we kind of joined at the start, but we kind of outdid everybody else, even though they were running strikers. at the end of the day as well. It is not just the build, it is also the person kind of piloting it. Not that I'm that amazing, that's not to say that. But yeah, it was much more obvious that well, maybe my allies were not as experienced. Yeah, let's go and do one more thing with this and then kind of move towards our
An
conclusion.
agent is no longer.
And just to kind of show the combined power of a few of these, as yeah, with a pre-made group, we're kind of we've grabbed here Trojan, who's running the well Cross actually, is running the Perfect Glass Cannon version here as well. Tiny Voice is running as well the Perfect Glass Cannon version. And then Pomic actually has the similar one of mine as with the 3-piece Lengmo. And yeah, let's actually see what happens when we bunch up a bunch of these together. I'm actually gonna grab Jaron Pulse as well. And yeah, let's run in.
You're right next to the
And
Washington Hotel.
we're not per se on
here
comms
we
together
go.
and coordinating,
That
but
should get their attention.
you know, we're players that kind of
Service entrance.
know each other's playstyle. One of the things that will happen here when we have multiple ticks kind of going around is that, first of all, well, in the group setting, yeah, the backbone isn't really at its full best power. And yeah, we'll get this crate going in because all loot. But yeah, we'll have multiple ticks kind of moving around and hurting enemies. And especially, for instance, if you have multiple enemies or one enemy by multiple ticks, yeah, that kind of stacks up. Here as well, I want to point out, searching this body, we can search that body, we'll get the sweet 3 key. It is very sweet.
Everybody, get to the atrium.
It is so sweet, it is triple sweet. I'm
Think
gonna
here.
try to keep up with my allies.
Hyena big shot.
And yeah, let's
Real
just go for
unpleasant.
speed
We
here.
need to kill this
Make it-
asshole.
Yeah, we have 3 directives on. I should have actually replaced my hive with something else because it's just going to be on cooldown all the time. Because yeah, I very much enjoyed using my pulse. I'm going to go for some of the squishier targets, for instance, that rusher there. But yeah, it is when multiple of these are around and kind of somewhat as well piloted by competent players, it can actually be a force multiplier. Just having multiple of those going, multiple ticks going around can do actually interesting things. Although, of course, yeah, it's quite rare outside of coordinated teams. I'm gonna go get the toilet loot. As we all know, toilet loot is the best loot. There is no loot like toilet loot, because toilet loot never flushes. So... I'm also gonna go for even more toilet loot as some rusher just comes at me like a spider monkey. We can't loot while disoriented, so we need to wait for that go away. So Pomic actually beats us to the key chest, man. And the sounds of multiple pesties being reloaded there. It's actually kind of funky. But yeah, we were creating kind of a unique situation. I am kind of double pulsing. Actually, I should keep mine for later. Forces of habit. And yeah, there I kind of went for the wrong target. I was just talking and not paying attention, but... And here then as well, we've turned the modifiers back off again. Modifiers can of course be very strong, but they also can be kind of too strong. And just to kind of show it without... Although of course, yeah, I'm still using the grade 25 bestie that I have, and you know, maxed out build in other
I
ways.
just found an ammo stockpile. I'm gonna detonate.
One thing I realize here is, yeah, we have so many coyotes. I'm gonna actually grab that. I'm gonna be selfish, grab that Lengmo mask, and that is actually in a group setting when there's enough coyotes. So yeah, everybody else was running a coyote. And then actually this setup, or well, actually not this setup, this setup, because yeah, I should put the Lengmo there, and then yeah, we
That's
can
what
bring
you
in
get, you
perfect
dumb
glass.
Sons of bitches.
You doing all right there, Kelso?
As long as I'm not breathing asbestos.
So I think I
That
might need
blast did
to,
a lot of
if I want to go that route. No, it's 49.5, so we're still perfectly set up for somebody else's coyote. We're kind of benefiting both from perfect glass cannon and having 3-piece Lengmo, and also contractors and foxes, but then yeah, relying on basically somebody else's coyote there. that is also the way that I would run it, especially, for instance, like even, well, in this setting, like where we have multiple coyotes. Because generally having 2 is already a good enough overall. See the heavy in the back, he's a good stacking target, but actually I'm gonna go to the side of the shield guy, and especially noticing that I have the side of it. I don't mind going for that. I'm gonna actually go all the way in the back. They'll jump down in a second. And we'll blind fire. At these kind of ranges, yeah, we can blind fire. And they do have disorient rounds from their special ammo. And we'll jump on for this loot as well. I always have that. So go for crate here. No loot left behind. We'll definitely leave behind teammates and stuff, and you know, important data and like our skills and fallen brethren and stuff. But yeah, no loot left. The important part. I'm just gonna quick loot here actually, just to catch up to my allies. Because overall, my inventory is generally too full to ever really just pick up all the loot on the ground. That is not something that will
I'm on the roof.
easily
Holding for
happen.
backup.
I have eyes on you, Kelso.
You see Saint?
I don't know what
One
he
thing you
looks
might have
like, but there are
noticed here
plenty
as
of
well
hostiles up
is
there.
Not for long.
that's how you usually can make out decent players as well. We haven't had it down yet. And that's not just partially as well, not just down to everybody playing their part well, but also generally if we see each other in trouble, that's also a thing for teammates to do, is if we see somebody kind of hitting another person of us down, we'll prioritize that target to kind of take them down. Kind of providing safety for each other just by paying attention, which randoms quite often don't do. And yeah, we'll push to the boss fight here. And especially this boss fight, I kind of picked this mission specifically, although there's a bunch of missions that are like this. And some even have better rooms at the end of it. For instance, Bank, where the spread would kind of just keep spreading. So we'll have a full stack kind of... Also, hey, Kelsa. Man is looking for you. But here we'll have likely a few stacks going around from each of us. And I'm gonna open up on those rushers. And that will make it that, yeah, a bunch of enemies will kind of be taken care of continuously. Because I have kind of a full stack going, although, well, that full stack died there. It didn't have anything in its range. But yeah, once there is basically a full stack going around, it's just gonna... It's just gonna murder, and especially as well, other people's stacks are in there. The thing we want to do here as well is just go for the boss. And once he's dead, that will be the final wave. Because otherwise, multiple waves spawn there. Shield going on. And here as well, we kind of took a few hits there, and that was, for instance, if I was perfect class, I feel at that point I would have actually been health gated. There we got left with like 60% health, which isn't a lot either. But yeah, we could take a little bit of chip damage without instantly falling over, which I do kind of... I feel that difference is potentially worth as well, going away from perfect class and a benefit for the Lengmo. But yeah, damage-wise, as we kind of saw, it's quite neck and neck. With perfect class kind of taking a little bit less and then hitting a little bit better in its DPS. But anyhow, let's go indeed finish this off. Let's go fight our biggest nemesis ever, which is a door. It is not just a door, it is the door. as Pamagia gets in and gets out, and that will actually spawn him outside of the elevator in a second, which will be a little bit faster as a shenanigan that you can do here. Although I'm getting the longest loading screen as well. I know, we have reached our biggest nemesis ever. Forget Keener. Say hello to the door. as always, a joke from the stream as always kind of goes around. I'm gonna finish off this guy. Although actually no, I'm just gonna let him die to pestilence. I don't even want to kill you. And they all have kind of this Orient round, so that's also why I'm not kind of pushing it. Because this Orient is just kind of annoying. There we go.
Manny, is Odessa on the line?
I'll patch her in.
Anyway, we'll just have a peek at the
Also has some news
ending
for you.
here.
We got Eleanor.
Is she okay?
She's okay.
Oh, Cross
I'm
actually
bringing
got
her home.
the project reward there as well.
Thank God.
As I didn't think he was around for those. But yeah, let's actually see our completion here. Yeah, Pamek kind of did us. I kind of kept up, and we kind of tried our best there. Our damage ranges are kind of pretty close to each other. But yeah, there is something interesting that kind of happens when we have multiples of these going around and kind of putting their basically, you know, it's kind of like that that effect of just passive income. We're just doing passive damage all around. And yeah, that does add up and actually make it quite easy. Also, I kind of like that. Yeah, we're all in the well 44 to 48 range on the accuracy there. But yeah, let's take this to its conclusion and round this out. And yeah, to round it out as we're sitting here touching the tips of our pestilences all together, I feel this is how you get an STD almost, right? But yeah, that brings us kind of to the conclusion of this big pesty extravaganza, as we kind of had it. Although we mostly, of course, looked at one specific style for the pestilence, and there is another, as Yoda once said, there is another. And that is the triple tick setup. That is in the build collection, of course, you can go and look for that one. But this setup is much more for dealing damage directly with our weapon, and then also the ticks kind of being pretty powerful. That one is much more set up for having multiple ticks going around, and we might actually visit that one in the future. But for now, this one I very much enjoy. And as you may have noticed there as well, some people have a tendency to say, like, you can't really survive on a glass. I think I went down once during the gameplay parts, especially in the group settings and such. We basically didn't go down at all, even with all of us being glass. Glass just requires you to understand how to play it, and if you're interested in becoming better at that, then I would definitely recommend the Improving Yourself series that I did a while back, and that is well worth looking into. If you are interested in improving yourself, it is still very valid to this day, all the points made in there. And this as well is a great teaching tool for glass. It isn't the hardest hitter when it comes to a glass build, because yeah, of course, with other weapons we could go that way, but this actually keeps you safe with the stagger and such, as it comes to you know, the pesty ticks just going around and keeping sometimes enemies busy and kind of keeping them off of you from being able to shoot you. That is quite powerful. And all of that together kind of makes this actually, as a holistic look of a build, very, very useful. And I've been enjoying running it around. It doesn't, of course, deal well with all of the directives or such. It has no way of, for instance, dealing with reduced ammo or with a pistolero, where other setups may, of course, be able to do such things. But just running it around, for instance, as we did today with 3 directives, makes it already plenty rewarding and a lot of fun. I very much enjoy trying to get the most out of this build, because trying to get the most out of it demands a little bit of attention to who you're starting the fight off with, murdering, sometimes as well who you're going to stack upon, which we didn't really discuss in through this. But if it's an enemy more so in the middle of the pack, it is much more likely to spread, of course. So yeah, we come to the end of this build showcase. If you enjoyed this, please do any and all of the algorithm things down below, as that is always very much appreciated. For future videos, we're going to continue on doing the character build collection updates, as the character 4 and Character 5, of course, are very much still awaiting that. Also, the MMR DPS table, or well, headhunting table actually, is of course the video I've already recorded, and that will likely follow this up in a few days. So yeah, I hope you join me for those. But for now, as always, have a good night.